If you were to gather together all the articles on the Green Book controversy, it would look something like this. And this pile has been growing ever since the film's Best Picture win at the Academy Awards. In this episode, we're going to unpack and disprove some of that controversy by way of audio tapes of Don Shirley and Tony Lip that have recently come to light. This is History vs. Hollywood, the Green Book controversy. On January 11, 2019, History vs. Hollywood received an email. It was regarding our article on Green Book. The subject line stated simply, Green Book. In the content, it said, "Your history," in quotes, "is full of untruths." There were two links to a website called Shadow and Act. Curious, I clicked on the links. It took me to the first article. Green Book is full of lies. Dr. Don Shirley's family speaks out. The article featured quotes from Shirley's last living brother, Maurice Shirley, and his niece, Carol Shirley Kimball. The 82-year-old Maurice said that though he refused to see the film, it was full of lies. One of his main complaints is he says that the movie depicts Shirley as being estranged from his family, which Maurice says was not true. Shirley's niece Carol said there was no due diligence done on the part of the filmmakers to contact the family to learn about Shirley. She said that the film is once again a depiction of a white man's version of a black man's life. Now at this point, it doesn't seem that either family member had actually seen the film. Now it's immediately obvious that the author of this article is biased against the film. She cited a review that the website did of Green Book, which was titled, "Green Book is a poorly titled white savior film." And the website gave the film its first ever 0-star rating. The main complaint that the author of the article is trying to make is that white filmmakers should not be making a movie about a black person. In fact, the article's closing line goes so far as to state, "I think to consistently see our stories and our black icons filtered through the lens of a racist white person like Tony Lip does nothing to advance the understanding of black history and only serves to perpetuate white supremacy." Now, it's clear that the author was holding a certain perspective, and while it's true that Tony Lip was indeed a racist at the start of the film, the whole point of the movie is that his experience with Don Shirley and his time with Don Shirley had changed him. By the end of the film, he had shed a lot of that racism that was in him in the beginning. A lot of that ignorance was gone, and that's the point of the movie, this change. And calling the film a white savior film, it's quite the opposite. It's actually Don Shirley who saved Tony Lip in many ways. Now, I can understand the family being upset that they weren't involved or contacted to be involved in the film. They could have offered information that would have helped make Mahershala Ali's character more complex and more rounded. It's also important to note that the movie is not a biopic of Don Shirley. It's a movie about both Don Shirley and Tony Lip and how their time together on the tour affected each of them. So at this point, I went back to the email and I clicked on the second link. It was titled, "How Green Book and the Hollywood Machine Swallowed Don Shirley Whole." Now, the second article was published on December 14th, 2018, and it appears by this point, at least some of the family members had seen the film. A nephew named Edwin had went to a screening with his family, and he informed Don Shirley's brother Maurice of what was in the film. The article then quotes Maurice as describing the film as a symphony of lies. And this is the quote that the media grabbed hold of and widely reported. Perhaps the biggest claim that the family members make in the article is that Don Shirley and Tony Lip were not friends. It was strictly an employee-employer relationship. Maurice Shirley and his wife Patricia scoffed at the notion that these two men were close friends. Patricia went on to say not at all, and that a professional relationship was the only kind of relationship that Dr. Shirley ever had with any of the people he worked with. So at this point, I took a step back. I knew that the family wasn't on the tour with Dr. Shirley and Tony Lip, so how did they know if they were friends or not? Were they simply stating this out of anger because they weren't consulted on the film, or did they have a valid point? It was hard to know. I knew I had used normally reliable sources in my article, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, The Guardian, as well as the documentary Lost Bohemia, which included interview clips with Dr. Shirley himself. My other sources were the filmmakers, including Tony Lip's son, Nick Vallelonga, a screenwriter on the film, as well as the actors, who said that they heard actual audio recordings of Tony Lip and Dr. Shirley. They said that they used these recordings to help them prepare for their roles and to give them background on the story. But would we ever hear these recordings, and did they provide more answers as to whether Tony Lip and Dr. Shirley were actually friends? So I didn't rush to change my article on History vs. Hollywood. There just wasn't enough evidence to do it at that point. Over the next few weeks, the family's comments had become the main controversy surrounding the film. It was around that time that I encountered a surprising headline on Deadline.com. It read, "Green Book. Listen to the real Doc Shirley and Tony Lip in tapes that informed Mahershala and Viggo's performances." Immediately curious, I clicked through to the article. It was by a man named Mike Fleming Jr., and he had previously interviewed Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen on the movie, and it was in that interview that they told him about audio tapes of Don Shirley and Tony Lip that they had listened to, which informed their performances. Mike had obtained these tapes, and he put them into 16 digestible clips. 4 of those clips were of Dr. Shirley, and the rest were of Tony Lip. The audio of Shirley had come from research done for a 2010 documentary called Lost Bohemia. It was by a man named Joseph Astor, a friend of Don Shirley. Like Shirley, Astor had lived in the same artist colony above Carnegie Hall. The artist colony and its residents were the subject of his documentary. So I began listening to the clips of Shirley, and the very first clip shattered the family's claim that Don Shirley and Tony Lip weren't friends. I listened to the other clips as well. In the next one, Don Shirley talked about the arrest and how he contacted Robert Kennedy to get them out of jail. This was in line with the movie. The third clip involved Don Shirley and Tony Lip escaping a hotel. Shirley described how after he played at a concert, Tony Lip convinced the proprietors of a bar to bend their rules and serve a drink to a black man. The aftermath of that involved them escaping an armed pack of white locals. I continued on and listened to the clips of Tony Lip, which further supported many of the things seen in the film. So I then replied to that person who had sent me the email, claiming that my History vs. Hollywood article was full of untruths. I didn't say much, but simply included a link to the Deadline article that featured the audio files of Don Shirley and Tony Lip that supported much of what is seen in the film. I was now confident that my article didn't need correcting. However, what I had soon realized was that no one else in the media was referencing these audio clips, and the controversy grew to a fever pitch after the film's Best Picture win a few weeks later at the Academy Awards. Don Shirley's relatives were still claiming that he could have never been friends with Tony Lip, and the headlines once again read, "Green Book, a symphony of lies." The media was eager to embrace the narrative that Green Book, made by white filmmakers, was a racist film full of untruths. It was at this time I decided to do the YouTube video, and I had made the decision that I would seek permission from Deadline.com to include clips of Don Shirley in this video. However, it had been about a month since I'd last been on the Deadline.com page that included the audio files of Shirley and Lip. And when I got there, I noticed something strange. All 4 audio files of Don Shirley had been removed. I'll admit I was stunned. The only thing that could prove that Don Shirley and Tony Lip were friends was now gone. The audio files had disappeared. So who forced Deadline to take these audio files down? Was it Joseph Astor, the man behind the documentary, whose research produced these files? Or was it the family? Or was it the author of the article himself? Though it might seem that that's where our story ends. The only audio of Don Shirley that verifies his relationship with Tony Lip will never be heard. However, I've done research long enough to know that when you come across audio files like that, you save them. And that's what I did back at the end of January. Though my original intention was to share some of these audio clips of Don Shirley in this video, it's clear now that doing so would get the video taken down almost immediately. So I'm going to do the next best thing. I'm going to read you exactly what Don Shirley said about Tony Lip in the first audio clip that was on Deadline.com. Don Shirley said, and I quote, "I trusted him implicitly. You see, Tony got to be, not only was he my driver, we never had an employer-employee relationship. We didn't have time for that bullshit. My life is in this man's hands, you understand me? So you got to be friendly with one another. You know, I taught him English because he couldn't talk. He was one of those Lower East Side Italians who had a jaw like a bulldog." And though the actual audio of that clip is not featured here, you can still listen to it. I'll include the link to the Deadline page in the description. Simply copy that link, go to the Wayback Machine of the Internet Archive at archive.org, paste the link in, and go back to the very first date of the page. You'll find all the audio is there. You can listen to each of the 4 audio files of Don Shirley. This includes him talking about the arrest and how he contacted Bobby Kennedy to get them out of jail. It includes him talking about how he had to escape the whites-only bar. And the final audio clip features Shirley talking about the Kennedy assassination and how racial overtones, even at that unthinkable moment, still persisted. The audio clips of Tony Lip further support much of the story. This includes bribing the cops at the YMCA, getting pulled over and arrested, after which Don Shirley contacted Robert Kennedy, how Don Shirley would educate Tony Lip on how he spoke, eating etiquette, how Don Shirley would teach him how to eat properly, and what became the basis for the fried chicken scene in the film. In another audio clip, Tony Lip describes how he got the job driving Don Shirley, and in that clip we can hear the voice of his wife Dolores. There's another clip of Tony Lip recounting the story of how Don Shirley always insisted on playing on a Steinway piano. In that clip, Tony Lip recounts how he discovered chicken bones inside of a piano, much like we see him discover garbage in the movie. And in the last clip, Tony Lip recounts the indignity that Don Shirley faced when he was not permitted to eat in the Virginia hotel where he had played at. Now, normally when you edit an article, you would put a note saying how you updated it or changed it. Deadline didn't do that, and no one would know that they removed those 4 audio files. So my hope with this video is to preserve what Don Shirley actually said, not what the relatives said, not what the filmmaker said, but the first-person account of what Don Shirley actually said about Tony Lip. In the quote I just read, Don Shirley said that they were friendly with one another and that they never had an employer-employee relationship. And like in the film, Don Shirley even said that he taught Tony Lip English because Lip didn't know how to talk. That's not something you do with somebody who's strictly a business acquaintance. I'm certainly not saying that everything in this film is true, and I point out the fiction and the facts in the article on History vs. Hollywood. You can find that article linked in the description below. I hope this video has helped to further clarify some of what is seen in the film and to put to rest much of the controversy surrounding it. If you like our videos uncovering the truth in films, click subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Facebook. Anchors away, everybody.